people are expected to contribute. If our current generation, particularly in the westernized sort of industrial nations, is quite selfish, to what extent will they be expected to contribute? I often get told that people they would not work for the greater good. Do we expect that once the transition starts happening, people will change anyway?
I'll address your second one first. Okay. They will change based on the cultural values and incentives that support the system. People are very much more malleable than I think than what's put forward in the general psychological propaganda that we're given. Just look at the effect television has. September 11th was able to convince millions and billions of people of a threat and make them fearful of a threat that was statistically nonsensical. The odds of any of us being killed in a terrorist attack are practically zero. My father is a retired postman. When he lives in rural North Carolina, it's rural area of the States, and he would drive around. He saw a guy that took plastic and covered all the windows of his entire house because he's afraid of a chemical attack. We're talking way out in the middle of nowhere. And this is just unbelievable. People's behavior will change dramatically once they are put into a condition that reinforces that behavior. So, I mean, I agree with you that we couldn't just take the culture now and plop them into one of the Jacques circular cities where everything's automated and people are contributing to common good. They wouldn't know what to do. It would be a distortion. It would be a distorted environment. That's unfortunate, and that's why I don't talk about, say, the cities as much. People email me constantly and they say, well, why don't we go start building this now? And I say, well, we should really build a research center that shows how it works and why it works and the values and the egalitarianism that's inherent in it, as opposed to just building, say, a commune, because that doesn't help anything. It has to be, the resources of the planet are distributed throughout the entire planet. I get attacked a lot saying that I'm instigating a world government. No, it's a logical deduction based on the reality that we have to have access to the resources, so we have to have an infrastructure that's regulated, regulated in the sense of observation, that can understand where everything is, so we can all use it together. It's just basic fundamental logic. So, I think it's going to take a cultural shift in reflection of the environment, a reflection of the positive attributes of the environment. I hope that makes sense. In other words, the environment will create the culture that's relevant for that environment to operate. I think I made that point relatively clear in the presentation. As far as your first question, which organizations will come on board, I wonder why more environmental agencies don't talk to me. I have emailed environmentalist agencies. Again, they're establishments. If you have a massive establishment and you're making millions of dollars to support your efforts to help the environment, which I'm sure are altruistic, but because it's an establishment and you're making money, they have a subconscious problem with thinking about the fact that we're going to remove the entire system that gives them their survival as in their employed environment. So, you know, activist organizations, back to her question, those that have been deprived, any type of poverty organization, I think should be right on board with this. The problem is it's too radical for most people to comprehend at this point. They can't get their head around it. If you just bring it up off the cuff, I mean, you're never going to have a chance. That's why I presented what I did. You have to show the problems first, and then ask them, what's your solution? If you drill them long enough, you'll see they'll come to virtually the same conclusion that the Venus Project did. It just makes perfect sense. Okay.
Hello.
Sorry.
I've got quite a few questions, but I try to reduce it to my most important ones. Have you ever heard of Martin A. Armstrong?
No, I haven't.
He is somebody who created the economical confidence model in the 1980s, and it just showed that the whole economical collapse of 2007, 2009, and how it's going to go further. And he just had all the knowledge, and he's in prison for more than 10 years already, just because of court contempt. And my point is that we have so much knowledge, we have the people who know everything, but everybody just blames that they prohibit it, that they do something. And C.G. Jung, Carl Gustav Jung, he was a good friend of Sigmund Freud. He was against Sigmund Freud because Sigmund Freud always said everybody is against something. Everybody made you how you are. It is your parents, it is your father, it is your mother, it is just the environment. And he said, it is just down to you. You have the responsibility, the ability to respond.
That's another limited perspective as well.
Yeah, and what you're always talking about is just that we can change something, meaning we can change, meaning that we have to change others, we have to make everything different. But even like Jesus said, it is just down to us. We have to change ourselves. When the billions of people in Africa are starving, we have the food, but we are starving in the intellectual and spiritual growth because we're just materialistic and greedy people.
Greedy people, great.
Yeah, and
sure.
Those in Africa, they know how to share the small amount what they have, but they just do not have the food.
Are you asking me about those two attributes, the attribute
no.
of?
And my main question is.
Okay.
My main question is if you think that everybody by himself has to change something, has to change themselves, or if we really need an institution that just changes other people.
It's a combination of the two. You have an ability to reference knowledge and to obviously decide, based in the realm of your education and experience, decide on what your behavioral patterns would be. I don't believe in something like free will, because there really can't be such a thing as free will. As an example of the feral children, if you're completely deprived of if you're not aware of certain things in your environment, then you're just not aware of it. So your options are restricted. So most people I meet, they're so blocked into the mentality of this system that you can't even bring up alternatives because they can't even see it. As in the example I made at the very beginning with the Wright brothers and Jacques' funny quote, because they didn't read the books of the experts that said you couldn't fly. They didn't have that restriction. They didn't have that frame of reference that inherently restricted their thought and creativity. So the point is that we do have a capacity to make decisions, which is contingent upon education. Where does education come from? Your environment. So the environment has to cultivate the person cultivates the environment. It happens simultaneously. I'm a big Krishnamurti fan, but he had a very serious obsession with everything being internal, and everything was about you. He talked about conditioning a lot. He was aware of the external, but you have to realize that we are products of our culture more than anything else. So I don't give people a pass and say, oh, this corrupt individual, he's just corrupt because of his environment, even though that's partially true. I also know that certain person does have a thought process. That certain person does know when they produce a product that's inherently inefficient, and that, for example, pharmaceutical companies will produce statistically proven, lab-proven drugs that will cause mortality. They know it. And what they do is they gauge the cost of their litigation based on how much the production is. If it's cheaper for them to make it with the mortality rate intact, and they can afford all the illegal litigation because of people suing them because of the death rates, they will move forward with putting that product out there. That's the nature of the system. So do I find that to be absolutely aberrant and messed up? Absolutely. But the people they're just doing what they do. They're in narrow box. Okay, well, we have to make money. There was a thing I didn't put in this, done by a psychologist.
And that is actually my problem. That you're always saying it is just the system, it is just everything, but just the people are the system.
We have to think about it.
And if somebody
how are we going to change
decides
the
to change
system?
it,
How are we going to change the system? People have to come to a realization about what's possible.
yeah,
So
if I'm the head of the research department, I can just say, yeah, we can make more money with this product that kills so many people, but if I just withhold this information and say, yeah, it is impossible to do it this way, we have to find another way that kills less people, then I have the power. It is always just down to each and everybody, in my opinion.
It is, but
like Carl Gustav Jung says it.
It is, but each person.
What would your way be to just put religion into practice, meaning just teaching everybody you're responsible for what you are doing, nobody else?
You are responsible for what you're doing based on the information that you've been given. If I'm told that one consequence of my actions will help me, but it will harm somebody else, I'm the one who has to justify taking the self-interest over harming somebody else. Why would I do that? Because of deprivation. Yeah. So if I'm poor and I'm aberrated and poor, and I have to go on the street and I have to shoot somebody knowing that it's wrong, but I have to do it to survive. If I have to steal knowing that it's wrong, I can make the decision not to, but the system is enforcing that, and therefore I do it because I have to survive. It all comes down to extrapolations of survival, but they go way out into outer distortion with highly rich people still being absolutely aberrated and doing absolutely horrific, offensive things because they think that's what the system supports. They feel comfortable doing it because they see it all around them. So I hope that